In this edition of Smith Business Close-Up with the University of Maryland's Robert H. Smith School of Business, Dr. Brent Goldfarb talks about his new research that finds the way a business plan is written has no bearing on whether a company receives funding. Dr. Goldfarb, thanks for being with us. What have you learned in looking through this business plan archive that you have?
So what we did is we tried to see whether submitting a business plan to a venture capitalist when trying to get venture capital funding was at all helpful for actually being successful in raising venture capital money. And we found that it wasn't. We found that submitting a plan or even an executive summary was not at all predictive of success in raising venture capital.
Does that mean people were getting venture capital without submitting anything?
Either they were submitting it and the venture capitalist wasn't reading it, or they were successful raising money just by building connections, social connections with the venture capitalists and getting the venture capitalists comfortable with them. And then at that point, the venture capitalist doesn't really need the business plan at all to learn about the business. They are able to learn it directly from the entrepreneur or some of the entrepreneur's friends and contacts.
Were these generally startups or going concerns that were just looking for additional funding?
In general, these were startups.
Okay.
So these were all, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that the lesson has always been, anytime we've interviewed somebody on entrepreneurship, that you need to prepare a very well thought out business plan. What does this tell us?
Well, this tells us that business plans are not used as a tool by venture capitalists to learn about businesses that they're going to fund. It doesn't tell us that there's no value in writing a plan at all, but it would suggest that on the margin, instead of copy editing your business plan, it'd be much better trying to generate connections in the business world or selling your product to customers or doing other more tangible business building activities.
Do you think that this information goes far enough that you'll see handbooks on entrepreneurship, textbooks on entrepreneurship, and courses on entrepreneurship being adjusted to take this into account?
Well, I certainly hope so, because I think that spending a lot of time learning how to perfect this particular form document is a waste of time. I know that we have started to implement that here internally at the Smith School. In the course that I teach and some of my colleagues, we no longer teach students how to write business plans. We do, learning how to write a business plan is very easy. You can go to a website, it's a very simple form document. We do teach them how to think very carefully about the logic of their business. And sometimes writing that down helps the entrepreneur figure out that logic and approach it with greater clarity. But at the same time, it's not at all useful as a tool to raise private equity.
I guess that was one of the explanations that I'd heard, was that the potential funder wants to see that you have thought about all these issues and prepared financial documents and prospective income statements, that sort of thing. Is it potentially more useful if you're talking to a funder other than a venture capitalist, maybe friends and family, angel investor, if you're going to a bank, that sort of situation?
Well, our research doesn't tell us that. We looked only at venture capital funding. But I would bet on the margin, it's still going to be better to go to a potential funder with a customer in hand than a business plan. So if on the margin, if you spent that extra time as an entrepreneur getting that customer or building that partnership instead of perfecting a couple paragraphs on page 17 of your business plan, that's got to be a better activity.
All right, interesting information. Dr. Brent Goldfarb joining us from the Smith School. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jeff.